Hi everyone, happy Fude Matsuri Day to each and every one of you, especially to fellow Fude lovers out there. Today is a special day for us because it is the Brush Festival in Kumano, Hiroshima, Japan. Now, unfortunately, because the pandemic is still going on and traveling is not an option, I am here in my home in the province, and for this video, I'm going to be talking about one of my most favorite makeup brushes to use, and it is these Yachiyo brushes. Now, I find it very fitting to talk about these today because it doesn't get any more traditional than this. So for this video, I actually want to talk about the reasons why I love using my Yachiyo brushes, and I also want to show you guys what I use them for. Now, truthfully, I have been delaying creating a video for my Yachiyo brushes, mainly because I have two other sizes that I don't have in my collection, so it's kind of incomplete. Now, I wanted to complete the set first before I was planning to talk about it, but unfortunately, because I'm still not able to travel, because the two other brushes that I want to purchase is from Hakuhodo, and although I have the option of buying them online, I actually want to see them first in person to see, to convince myself if I really need those brushes of those size. Okay, so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna flip my camera over and then I'm gonna talk about these brushes one by one. Now, my Yachiyo brushes come from 3 different brands, and I'm going to start by talking about this particular brush here. This is my oldest brush, and I bought this in Hyakusuke in Tokyo back in 2011. Now, if we take a look at the brush head here, as you guys can see, it's very compact, and it actually has a round brush head design. One thing also that I do have to say though is that I actually had to run some super glue across the entire handle of the brush because I just didn't want it to unravel. And one other thing, all Yachiyo brushes come with a string at the very end. Now, if we take a look at the brush head here, it's still very beautiful despite its age. It's very soft and it has a nice bounce to it, and it really goes back into its shape after you've played around with it. Now, for the sake of comparison, this is my Hakuhodo Yachiyo brush, and if we just compare it, we can see that the quality of both brushes are quite different, especially at this part. It just looks like it's not so well made. Now, even with my number 8 Yachiyo brush, if we just put it here and if we just compare it visually, the Hyakusuke Yachiyo brush pales in comparison between these two. And the next 3 brushes that I have here are my Yachiyo brushes from Hakuhodo. Now, these 2 Yachiyo brushes here, although they have a very different brush head design, are their large Yachiyo brushes in their collection. Now, one brush head here has a rounded brush head shape, while the other one has a tapered brush head shape. Just look at the quality. They have the same length, by the way. And this large Yachiyo brush here is one of my favorites. It's my go-to, and the brush head here is made of full goat hair. Very nice and very bouncy, very resilient. It really does go back into shape after you've played around with it. Look at that, it's so beautiful, isn't it? If we just take a look at the brush head, it looks exquisite and it reflects the light, especially if you just twirl it under the light. Look at that, so beautiful. Now, the next 2 brushes that we have here are the tapered Yachiyo brushes. Look at that, still very beautiful. Now, one here is a large tapered Yachiyo brush, and the other one is a medium-sized tapered Yachiyo brush. Now, the large tapered Yachiyo brush here is still very strong, very resilient, nice bounce, and it has a very full belly here. Very beautiful. And I really love how the light glistens from the tips of the brush head. Very beautiful. Now, the medium tapered Yachiyo brush also has a very full belly, which really keeps its shape, and it also gives it strength and resiliency to go back into shape after you've played around with it. Now, I do have to say that these 3 brushes from Hakuhodo are my benchmark on how good quality Yachiyo brushes are made. And the most recent addition to my brush kit is this Yachiyo brush from number 8, and it still has a nice round brush head design, very sturdy, very resilient. It still goes back into shape after you've played around with it. Now, I bought this at Fude Matsuri when I was there in 2019, and there's actually some quality issues with this. If we can just see it here, we can see that there's a gap between the wrappings of the cane throughout the handle. Now, that's the thing, if you buy brushes during Fude Matsuri, you get them at a discounted rate because there are some quality issues with this. But I have to say, it doesn't really undermine the way that you use this brush for in any way that you want to. Now the brush head of the number 8 Yachiyo brush actually blooms in a much more wider sense in comparison to that of my Hakuhodo Yachiyo brush. They almost have the same brush length, by the way. So if we can compare it here, as you can see, the Yachiyo brush from Hakuhodo has a much more tighter look to it, and it doesn't bloom as much, and you don't get a lot of fraying around the edge of the brush head. Unlike the number 8 Yachiyo brush here, it blooms in a much more bigger sense, and you also get some fraying around the edge of the brush head. All my Yachiyo brushes come with a full head of goat hair, and the brand of the brush is actually indicated by the color of the string that is located at the very end of the handle. So my number 8 Yachiyo brush actually has a black string at the very end of it. My 3 Yachiyo brushes from Hakuhodo have a purple string at the very end, and my Hyakusuke Yachiyo brush actually has a white string at the end of the handle. So I found it very interesting that since there's no branding evident at the handles, I find it a very nice touch that the strings at the very end indicate which brand the Yachiyo brush belongs to. Now, speaking of other colored strings on the handle, I have seen one Yachiyo brush which has a red string at the end of it, and it belongs to the Japanese cosmetic brand Yachiyo, if I remember the name correctly, and it's actually a Kyoto-based cosmetic company, if I am correct. And there's also one other Japanese makeup brand that I follow, and they are called Mitsuyoshi. It's like a stage kind of a makeup brand, and the strings on their Yachiyo brushes also come in a purple color like this, but maybe it's a little bit darker. I'm just not too sure because I haven't purchased any of their brushes, but I've seen them online, and I've actually wanted to purchase them before when I went to Tokyo in 2011, but it was just so difficult to find their store. Hopefully in the future, when traveling is an option and it won't be difficult to enter another country, especially Japan, I'm planning to actually purchase a few other Yachiyo brushes from different brands. I have a different varieties of Yachiyo brushes in my collection. Now, I have observed that brushes with a string at the end are evident in brushes that are made in traditional methods. So may it be for calligraphy or for makeup, they all have strings here at the very end. And I think it's because you can actually hang them on wooden frames. Now, I have seen these wooden frames a number of times when I've bumped into a few brush workshops, and I went to Kumano back in 2019. And I've also seen these like brush frames in a few videos and pictures online, most especially on one of the videos of Sonia G on her YouTube channel. I'm gonna put a link down to that video so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. Now, I've been very intrigued by those brush frames, and I've actually wanted to purchase one for myself, but because again, I can't travel to Japan at this time, and I have so much wood laying around at the house, I actually created my own brush frame, if you guys can see here. Now I'm gonna insert a video here of me hanging my Yachiyo brushes on that brush frame that I made. And I think this brush frames is not only good for decorative purposes, but they're actually a great way for drying brushes because it just prevents water from seeping into the base of the brush. So it makes the brush actually last longer. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys what I use my Yachiyo brushes for, and what I'm gonna do right now is I'm going to bring my camera closer. Pardon the lighting, by the way. I'm just using natural light at the moment. Well, I have an artificial light on, but that's just to supplement the light here in the room because it has been very cloudy and rainy this past few days here. And if I don't do this video now, I might not have another opportunity to do it because the weather is gonna be raining for the next few days. All right, so what I have here is my Hyakusuke Yachiyo brush, and I am going to be using this for applying foundation. So I've loaded some of the product here at the tip of the brush, and I'm just going to start by layering the foundation on my face. So I actually like using this particular Yachiyo brush when I am applying liquid foundation because after all, traditional Japanese makeup comes in a liquid form, especially that white makeup of theirs for geishas and kabuki actors. Now, I don't use the Yachiyo brushes for cream foundation because it's not strong enough. The brush head is very, very soft for such types of formulas. So again, it's actually very easy to blend liquid foundations using Yachiyo brushes. And although I see some streaking going on, it's actually quite easy to buff it and to blend it into the skin. Now, one thing that I like about Yachiyo brushes is that it actually helps you to blend out products fairly well and easily on the skin. Now, this brush is actually quite old, so I got a lot of fallout from the bristle. So I really think that it's high time that I should change this brush. Alright, so that's a very nice thin layer of foundation down. And what I want to do is I actually want to add some concealers in area where I have some blemishes. And I'm going to get my Matsukondo brush. So this is for stenciling kimonos with color. So this is actually what I also like to use when I want to add a few layers of concealer in some areas on my skin. And I also want to add some here on my neck because I got bitten by an insect last night, so it looks like Dracula visited me in my bed last night. Now, I really like using this because the brush head is very small, and although it looks squarish, it's actually round, and it actually picks up and deliver cream products extremely well. I think this is made of horsehair if my memory serves me right. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add a very thin layer of foundation in my under eye area. I just loaded some of the foundation at the tip of the brush here, and I'm just going to apply a very thin layer in my under eye area. Okay, next I have my medium taper Yachiyo brush from Hakuhodo, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a thin layer of highlighter at the highest points of my cheekbones. And I really like this taper design because it really helps in applying product fairly well and easy into a specific area. I'm also adding some on my brow bone. Just it just catches the light because it's a very cloudy day today. I'm just so glad it's not super overcast that it's dimming down the natural light coming from outside. Okay, now I'm going to add some cream blush. So this is from Lisa Eldridge, and I'm just loading my large and round Yachiyo brush with color, and I'm going to apply the color here on my cheekbones, and I'm just spreading it. So as you guys can see, that's what I love about using a Yachiyo brush for cream blushes. It actually, like, delivers a nice diffused color in the cheeks instantly, and this is because of the round design of the brush head. So it's very easy, very simple. And what I like about using a Yachiyo brush for cream blushes is that, it doesn't create any form of patchiness on the cheek, unlike some brushes out there, especially if they're very dense. It really lifts the product from the cheeks. And the good thing with the Yachiyo brush, it's because it's quite fluffy and airy. It's able to apply a diffused color on the cheeks. Right, it's very nice, very easy, fairly simple, and look at that, very beautiful, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna go back now to my medium-sized Yachiyo brush, the tapered one from Hakuhodo, and I'm just blending whatever is left of the highlighter into my blush, just so that we have a seamless color application. And if I just want to intensify the color a teeny tiny bit, I'm gonna get the brush, I'm gonna reload some of the product that I have here at the back of my hand, and I'm just gonna gently tap it into my cheekbones. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back to my Yachiyo brush that I used for foundation earlier, and I'm just gonna use that to blend out the edges. Okay, and that's that. Fairly easy and very simple, right? Very beautiful colors, even, well diffused, and you have very nice color application on your cheeks. So I'm just like intensifying that some more, just so that we have a much more nicer pop of color. Now I have also used my Yachiyo brush for gel type blush formulas. So this is from Glossier, this is their Cloud Paint, and I've loaded the color here at the tip of the brush head, and I'm just spreading it on the back of my hand. And now I'm gonna apply that color straight into my cheeks. And as you guys can see, it's actually blending it out fairly well and fairly easily. Now, as you guys can see, it's actually delivering the same type of application the way it's applying my cream blush. And you know, gel blushes are quite difficult to blend out, especially if they have this, you know, quick drying formula. And as you guys can see, the Yachiyo brush is actually delivering a very nice diffused color in the cheek, and it's doing it fairly well, fairly fast, and fairly easily. And mind you, a gel blush is actually quite difficult to blend out because, you know, the formula is very volatile, so it really dries up very fast. And I have noticed that if I use a Yachiyo brush when I am applying gel blushes, it actually does the job of blending and, you know, applying a very nice diffused color on the cheeks. Alright, so this is my initial color down, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to apply a much more vibrant blush color, and I'm just gonna use the same brush that I used when I applied the initial color, and I'm patting on a much more vibrant orangey tone blush. So as you guys can see, the Yachiyo brush is actually blending the two colors well, very fast and fairly easy. It's very, very simple. Alright, so now I'm gonna get the brush that I used for my foundation earlier, and I'm just gonna blend the edges so that we have a very nice, well diffused and well blended look on the cheeks. Okay, now so I'm gonna set my face with powder, and I'm gonna be using my large tapered Yachiyo brush from Hakuhodo, and I'm just loading the brush head with some powder, and I'm just going to pat it gently onto my skin. Now, truthfully, Yachiyo brushes are used more for powders, but I really believe that Yachiyo brushes are multi-use brushes, and you can use them for liquid and cream products. And they actually do the job of applying and blending the products extremely well onto the face. Alright, so that's a very thin layer of powder down on my face. I'm just removing any of some excess shine. And what I'm doing now is I'm removing some of the powder on a microfiber towel. And I'm going to be using the same Yachiyo brush, and I'm going to be using this to apply a very, like, you know, thin layer of Orgasm blush on my cheek. I really find Yachiyo brushes to be strong enough to pick up, you know, hard-pressed blush formulas or even hard-pressed powder formulas in pan form. They really do an excellent job of delivering pigments from this type of formulas. And just like that, you can see that the Orgasm blush is actually enhancing the cream blush that I applied earlier. Okay, so now I'm flipping the brush to the other side, the cleaner side, and I'm going to be picking up some of this, like, you know, matte blush from Laura Mercier, and I'm just being very careful about it, because there's also one thing that I have noticed with the Yachiyo brushes is that if you are using matte blushes or talc formula blushes, it can also tend to pick up a lot of products. So just be very careful when you are layering this type of blush formula into the cheeks. Just work with very thin layers so that you don't, like, you know, apply one full impact of color into the cheeks. Alright, as you guys can see, the Yachiyo brush is actually blending out the color extremely well into my cheeks. And I'm using a matte blush formula so that this will also set the cream blush that I used earlier. Okay, so this is how the Yachiyo brush applies and blends hard-pressed blush formulas, especially the ones that has a lot of shimmer on them. Very nice and very well diffused. And this is also how a Yachiyo brush applies and diffuses matte blush colors onto the cheeks. Very nice, very multi-use, I have to say. Now, I have also used my Yachiyo brush for applying bronzers. You can also use this. They work very, very well. So let's just do that. So I'm applying a very thin layer here on, like, you know, the outer perimeters of my face. And I'm just going to apply a little bit on my cheekbones for some bronzing. If you want to be more precise with your bronzer, you can use the tapered Yachiyo brush, but I actually want to apply a much more diffused bronzer look. So I'm using the round Yachiyo brush for my bronzer application. If you want, you can also just, you know, brush your bronzer across your nose just so that to make it look much more slimmer. Now, one other thing, I actually like using my Yachiyo brush when I want to apply some Guerlain meteorites on my skin. You know, Guerlain meteorites are finishing powders. And unfortunately, I just don't have any with me at the moment because I left them on my table in my home in Metro Manila. But I find that the Yachiyo brush has a very resilient and strong brush head that it's actually strong enough to break down the pearls on the Guerlain meteorites, and it's actually strong enough to mix the pigments together, and it really applies a very diffuse amount of color onto my face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link down into the description box to my Guerlain Meteorites review and demo so that you guys can see how I use my Yachiyo brush in tandem with my Guerlain Meteorites. Now, one other thing before I let you guys go, I just remembered that I have one other Yachiyo brush in my collection that I haven't used in years, and it's actually this Yachiyo brush from Hyakusuke. And as you guys can see, the cane has started to unravel from the handle, and that's the main reason why I've kept it in storage. And I've actually wanted to bring this to the brush festival for a few years now because I want to put this into the Fudezuka. Now, the Fudezuka is a burial mound for brushes at the brush festival, and it's where people put their old brushes, so that, you know, it's just one way of thanking them and for bringing them into eternity so that they can rest well. So I actually keep on forgetting to bring this for the past two trips, and what I want to do is I want to flip my camera over so that we can unravel this together and we can actually see what is inside a Yachiyo brush, and we can just see like some of the components, because, you know, I have been very intrigued on how a Yachiyo brush looks from the inside, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to see it together. So the cane wrapping on this Yachiyo brush actually started to unravel as soon as I started to use it, and I have not used this brush extensively, and I'm still quite surprised on how damaged it has looked, and it is because of this brush that I actually had to run some super glue across this Yachiyo brush here, just so that it's a form of preemptive measure so that it doesn't look like this. Now, I forgot to mention earlier that all Yachiyo brushes look like this. There is a cane wrapping that goes along the entire handle, and this part here where the ferrule is supposed to be, the cane wrapping also keeps the brush head in place. And I'm so amazed, like, you know, on this very thin handle design. It's very cute. One thing that I do have to say is that despite a Yachiyo brush being made by different brands, they all look like this. Okay, so now let's try to see what's inside this Yachiyo brush. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start by unraveling the cane wrapping of this brush, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try to do it slow because I'm just too excited. All right. Okay, and as we can see, the brush head is starting to show its base now. So I'm just having a little bit of trouble removing the cane at this part. But we can already see the structure of the brush head, and it's starting to look very cool. So let me just continue to remove the cane wrapping, and hang on. Oh wow. Okay, so we can actually see right now that the red handle, well, the base handle is starting to show, and we can also see that the brush head is also starting to show its structure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the entire cane wrapping, and I'm just going to come back once I'm through. Alright, so I'm actually quite surprised on how much cane wrapping there is on this Yachiyo brush. But anyway, so this is what a Yachiyo brush looks in its structure. It has this red handle here, and it's made of plastic, and I think it's common among other Yachiyo brushes that they all have a red plastic handle, or maybe it might be a wooden handle and it might have been painted red, because most of the Yachiyo brushes that I see have a red base at the very end of the handle. And so this is how the brush head looks like. Wow, isn't this amazing? Isn't this cool? And I think it is attached at the very tip of the handle here, but I'm not going to remove it because I want to keep it at this state. And there's a yellow string here at the very base of the brush head, so I think this is the one that makes the brush head bloom, so depending on how tight they wrap it. And there's also like a metal wire that wraps around the entire, does it wrap around the entire body of the brush? Wait, let me see. Okay, actually, no, oh, it ends here. So the metal wrapping or the metal string actually, like, you know, wraps around the entire brush, and then it ends in this part. Wow, that's amazing. And there's like a rubber band here at the very base, so maybe just to keep the brush head in place. Alright, so this is how a Yachiyo brush looks unwrapped, and how cool is that? Alright, so that's it for me today, guys. I'm gonna let you go now because I can see the clouds starting to roll in, and I'm just so scared that I might lose all of this light. And if you happen to have any more questions about how I use my Yachiyo brushes today, please leave them down in the comments box and let's have a conversation about this. And one other thing, if you happen to have a Yachiyo brush in your possession, please let me know how you use it and what you like to use it for, and maybe I can also pick up a few tips and tricks from you guys. Alright, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye bye.